Hey everyone, welcome back to another Fireside Chat. I am Gini Dietrich, your host and the author of Sin Sucks. Today, I am going to go a little bit off the range when we talk to Jim McCormick and Maryann Karinch. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves in a second, but I actually found them on Roger Dooley's podcast. He took them step by step through a sales meeting, and they discussed how sales and body language intercept each other for either great meetings or horribly useless ones. As I listened to their conversation, I thought about how communicators could benefit for several reasons. In many cases, we are in charge of new business development, so we not only have to go to sales meetings, but we have to sell during those meetings. We also tend to do a lot of speaking. We might do keynote conferences, we might speak on panels, we might present to boards, clients, or executives, or we have to sell our ideas internally. So we do a lot of speaking. Maybe we're the spokesperson for the company. We do a lot of speaking ourselves. And we're relationship builders by nature. And what Jim and Maryann speak about is rapport building and how important that is in sales. They are the authors of Body Language Sales Secrets. They are here to talk to you about how to manage your risk and your comfort zones, how to read what you're receiving and be conscious of what you're giving from a body language perspective, the glitchy behavior that you demonstrate. This is one of the things I do when you're stressed, and the types of things you should do in a meeting, particularly with the decision maker. Welcome, Jim and Maryann.
Thank you very much, Gini.
So I would love to hear, I heard both of you on Roger Dooley's podcast, whom we adore. And I really liked the way that he had you introduce yourselves. I wouldn't normally have you introduce yourself because I will have done that. But I really like the background that both of you have. And so Maryann, would you mind just giving us a quick synopsis of who you are and how you got here?
Oh, sure. I got here because of working with an Army interrogator on learning body language and combining that with my own background, which was in the theater. And then, of course, this is decades of experience, coming together and having a fascination with body language and then learning some of the psychology of it, getting better at reading it and learning to teach it, writing about it, researching, meeting all kinds of great people, particularly in the intelligence community, and learning how it gets, these things get applied when it's a life and death situation.
Right. And you and Jim came together?
What we came together because he has a background in sales and I have a background in body language, and we intermingled our experiences, and he's just naturally good at body language also.
That's awesome. So Jim, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Well, my background is I spent my entire career in business in a variety of different ways, and I've always had some degree of sales responsibility, although that doesn't necessarily mean, like many of your viewers or the people in your audience, that they have sales in their title.
Right.
And my observation is, I think some of the most important things that we need to sell are ideas. Ideas, concepts, and initiatives. And I have an MBA in finance and marketing. I was a former chief operating officer of the 5th largest architectural firm in the United States. And then for 20 years, I was selling what is arguably the most difficult sale, which is myself. And I think short of selling yourself and selling concepts, those are probably about as difficult as it gets. I think it's much easier in most cases to sell a product or a service. So that was the background that I brought to the discussion, although I've always had a fascination with risk-taking, which correlates to the fact that for the last 30 years, I've been a professional skydiver, and with over 4,600 skydives and 15 world records. So I believe... Wow. I believe that being good in sales means you have to be willing to take some risks so that they correlate.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it because I think that's really fascinating. And, one of the things that we really focus on as communicators is on what we say, but not necessarily on how much on how we say it. So we're very good at, crafting messaging and crafting words so that they come across to a variety of audiences, but we don't necessarily spend as much time on how we say it. So how much of effective communication is determined through actual body language?
Maryann, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Let me start with the fact that body language encompasses not just your movements, but also your tone of voice, various vocal characteristics, even what you're wearing and how you're positioned in a room. All of those things are relate to body language. It's the nonverbal aspect, meaning just whatever it is that doesn't involve words. So if you look at it that way, you can see that a huge percentage of our communication has to do with our body language.
You know, it's really interesting because we're in this digital world, right? And we're having this conversation over video chat, which we wouldn't have been able to do even 5 years ago. And I think it's interesting because we can see body language and all those, and hear tone of voice and all those kinds of things, but it certainly does not replace the in-person experience. So how do you see digital sort of changing that?
Digital allows us to connect, in ways that aren't really intimate, but at the same time, they do clue us in to some very important aspects of the other person, things that we couldn't get at before quite so easily because all we had was phone.
Right.
If we were not in the same room. But at the same time, we're learning a lot of new body language techniques, I think, with digital technology because it's tough. You and I are not in the same room. It's not completely comfortable. It's not like we have a cup of coffee on the table between us or something. We have to learn some new ways of really using this. Particularly, if we're trying to make a deal with somebody, how do we get that intimate experience with the digital technology? There's new techniques for all of us to learn.
You know, Ginny, it's interesting that you asked that question because Maryann and I both have written a number of books, and I just submitted the 7th edition of The First Time Manager to the publisher, and I put an entirely new paragraph or chapter on that exact issue of how to conduct video meetings effectively. And my observation is video is superior to audio only, but obviously it's inferior to in-person. But the bottom line is when we're engaging in this format, it's really important that you be abundantly clear with the message that you're presenting because you are deprived of some of the communication devices that are present when you're in the same room.
So what are some other, and I will certainly not give away your first chapter, your new chapter, but what are some other things that we can be thinking about when we're, especially when we're selling or in new business meetings with a prospect over voice or video chat?
Doing exactly what you did with us, which is it's really important that you provide your participants with an agenda in advance. There's great value before you initiate a video conference and having one-on-one phone conversations with each of the participants so they're up to speed, their questions have been answered so they don't have to address them during the video conference.
Sure.
The third component that's very important is that you continually check in with the participants, make sure that they are picking up on the message and and pinging them to determine if they have any questions. Because it's not like you're sitting around a conference table and you can see people's eyes, you can see if they're starting to fade or if they're engaging. So it's important that you do that also. It sounds a little pedantic, but it's really important because otherwise people could drift off and you'd have no awareness of that.
Sure. During Roger's podcast, one of the things that you both talked about is when somebody's in a meeting and they're evaluating you or they're calculating something in their brains, there are a couple of things that they do. Can you speak to that?
Maryann, you want to handle that one?
Sure. When people are calculating, a lot of times they'll change their where they're looking. The eye, it's as though the eyes are looking for an answer inside the head. Also, sometimes because people are get a little glitchy, they're thinking, so they might do something that we call an adapter, which is a nervous gesture, and all it means is I'm thinking or I'm not quite sure what to say. There are changes in the tone of voice, because again, maybe buying time or just a little nervousness about what am I going to say next.
So Jim, one of the things you talk about in the beginning here was risk and taking risk. And early in my career, I worked for a big global PR firm. And one of the things they would say to us is, you have to bring in new business. They never taught us, what does that mean? And, as a 25-year-old, how do you go and network and find new business? But we were responsible for it. And you talk about taking risk, and I think it's really hard in general for communicators to do that because it's not an innate, selling is not an innate skill. So how can, when you're responsible for either generating business for the company that you work for, the agency you work for, what are some things that you should be doing, and how do you get yourself comfortable with that risk?
First thing I would do is encourage your listeners and your viewers to not think about it as sales. It's not sales.
Right.
What it is something that I bet you they're actually quite good at, and that's rapport building. And they probably do that well one-on-one and maybe in a small group.
Sure.
But the rapport is the core of the sales process. And once you've established rapport, then you have credibility. And that's where the engagement component is so critically important that we speak of at length in Body Language Sales Secrets, because when you have that high degree of engagement, it tells people that you're genuine, you're sincere, and you're focused on them. If you can think in terms of simply rapport building, just like you're meeting somebody for the first time and you're genuinely interested in them, and you can't fake it. You need to genuinely be interested in them. Just like when we started this conversation, the first thing we did before we started recording is we talked about where we were and what the weather was like, because we were establishing some of that baseline rapport.
Yep. And you're in Estes Park, which I'm extraordinarily jealous about. If I show up on your doorstep one day, you'll know why.
You'd be welcome.
I'll bring my bike. So as we're building rapport, and I think, this works either, of course, on video chat, like the example you just used with us, but also in person. What are some things that are positive body language and some things that are, negative, or some mistakes that professionals make?
Maryann, let me start with that one, and then you can fill in the gaps if that's all right.
Sure.
The most important component as far as positive body language is being engaged, being forward, being present with the individual that you're communicating with. As soon as you start to turn to the side, it suggests that you're losing interest in them, that you have some sort of insincerity or some sort of fear about the connection that you're creating with them. Eye contact is critically important. Basically, you need to be, engagement is the buzzword. You need to be engaged with them, not to the point where you're intimidating, but to where you're completely present and there's nothing else that's on your mind when you're interacting with them. As soon as you start to look off to the side, lose eye contact, turn or in one way or another, then it sends a message, whether it might be subliminal or they might be aware of it, that you're losing interest in them.
Maryann?
Right. Well, Ginny, you are very, very good. You're very gifted at communicating directly with people.
Thank you.
When, what you convey is openness. And it's a very invitational body language. And that's always what we're going for, is that smile, and as Jim said, looking at someone's eyes, really connecting, and making sure that there's the sense of like, I'm really interested in you. You do this very, very well. You sort of naturally convey an openness that says, hey, come on into my chat room. And it's very relaxing. It's, that's what you really want. That's initially, that puts people at ease. That establishes trust. And that's really where you're going with this whole thing. If you're building a relationship, for trying to make a deal or whatever you're trying to do, building trust is where you start.
So Jim, one of the things that you alluded to is mimicking or mirroring a person's body language. And when I hear the two of you talk about this, it makes me laugh because I have a 4-year-old who's going through the phase of copying everything that you do and say, which is not super flattering and super annoying, to be perfectly honest about it. But there is a certain aspect of mimicking the other person's body language. So tell us a little bit about that.
And mimicking is not, we're not speaking of mimicking in the most precise definition. But what we're speaking of is having an awareness of what messages you're receiving from the person you're interacting with. And you can, by matching them, as I would say instead of mimicking them, matching their level of energy, you can then move them in the direction that serves your purposes. If they are glitchy, if they are anxious, you can bring them down by the pace of your voice, by the level of eye contact that you have, by how you're communicating with them. You can help them to relax and then move them in the direction that you want. That's what we mean by mirroring or mimicking. And it's because, as with everything that we speak of in the book, it's about the body language you're receiving and the body language that you're sending. And that's creating that connection. And you can't expect to bring somebody to a positive place of connection before you start with matching them where they're at.
Right. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use myself as an example here. I do a lot of speaking and keynote speaking. And in 2012, I did a keynote speech and a friend of mine was in the audience, and she came up to me afterward and she said, "That was great. May I offer you some advice?" And it's one of those where you're in a position where you're like, well, I would like the advice, but I don't know. So of course I said, sure. And she said, "Stop playing with your hair." And I didn't even realize I did that. And Maryann, one of the things you talk about is those sort of glitchy, nervous habits that we do. Like, apparently I kept moving my hair off to the side. So I actually had to say to my hairdresser, do something with my hair so it's not in my face, because that's a glitchy thing for me. So we talk about our glitchy habits, especially when stress is involved.
Sure, you bring up such a great point, because I was doing a speech not that long ago about body language, and I said it was a small group, and I said to the people in the audience, think about what you do when you're nervous. Think about the glitchy things that you do. And one of the women said, well, I do this and I do that and I do this other thing. And the whole time she was talking, she was playing with her necklace.
Oh, interesting.
And so other people in the room, it was a relatively small group. And I said, and what else does she do? And she looked at me and she said, that's it. Those are my adapters. And so everybody else said, and you play with your jewelry.
Wow.
Which was so funny. She had no awareness of it. It was similar to your hair thing, that there are some things that we just do so often. So, it's a go-to gesture that we don't even realize that that's an adapter, that's something we do when we're nervous. And other people pick it up, and we have to be aware of each and every one of them.
So how, other than being aware, how do we change that?
90% of it, I think, is awareness, because then you realize, if I'm in a situation where I'm meeting someone, where I'm trying to, sell myself or whatever, then there's going to be a certain amount of nervous energy, and you just know that you have to breathe, keep yourself calm, and in some cases use a substitute, like curl your toes, because nobody can see
nobody can see that.
Unless you're wearing open-toed shoes.
Sure.
So, you have to get that energy out, which is what you're doing. It's a self-soothing gesture that's using extra energy. Then just do something that nobody will notice, hopefully.
Got it. Okay. Well, this next round of questioning is to get to know you both a little bit personally. We've talked the business side of things. So I'm going to ask you quick questions that you can answer with the first thing that comes to mind, and I'll just trade you off. So, Jim, what's your favorite book?
Into Thin Air, which is by John Krakauer, about the treacherous and disastrous climbs of Everest.
Yes, great book. I highly recommend that. Maryann, favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast?
I know the answer to that.
This one?
No, Maryann, I know the answer to that.
You know the answer to that.
It's on NPR. Wait, don't tell me.
Wait, don't tell me. It's pretty great.
Oh, wait, I know. I aspire to be on that panel.
Oh, well, let's see if we can make that happen.
Oh, yeah.
They tape it here in Chicago. That'd be awesome.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's
funny. Jim, coffee or tea?
Oh, definitely coffee.
Aha. Maryann, what was your last vacation?
What was Squirrel Island in Maine.
Oh,
yes.
Nice. When was that?
That was last August.
Okay.
And
great time to be there.
Whoa, what a lovely, peaceful place.
Huh. I'll have to remember that. Jim, what's your favorite snack?
Oh, there's the ones I should eat and the ones that I do eat. But I can honestly say the snack I indulge in more often than anything else is an apple.
An apple? Wow. Keeps the doctor away.
However, there is some chocolate that recently showed up from a client, and it is devastatingly good.
Oh, dear. Those are the things I have to hide. Maryann, what's the best meal you've ever had?
In South Dakota, Deadwood, South Dakota. It's a restaurant owned by
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner, right.
No kidding?
And it's right in Deadwood, South Dakota. It was amazing.
Huh. I'm going to have to add that to my list. That is not one I would expect. Jim, what is your latest binge?
Oh, my latest binge has been travel.
You do have a new book out. That comes with the territory.
That's true. Well, but next month I'm going to Australia for 2 weeks and then Thailand for a week for a skydiving event. So that'll keep me away for 3 weeks, and that's going to be that'll be fun and challenging.
That is a big one. And Maryann, the last question goes to you. What is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure, it's chocolate. It's chocolate. I really, if anybody wants to be my friend, they just have to send me really good chocolate.
I disagree with you, Maryann. I think your guilty pleasure is the gym. You'd be in the gym 5 hours a day if you could.
That's a good guilty pleasure.
It goes well with the chocolate, right?
Right, yeah. That's why you can eat the chocolate.
That's right.
You have that other guilty pleasure.
Yeah, right.
So the book is Body Language Sells Secrets. What's next for the two of you?
Well, once the book comes out, as you know, then it's your opportunity to present that information to the world. So it really focuses, and I tend to work a lot with executives and sales leaders, and Maryann works with people in a broad range of areas for body language expertise. So it's really taking that message and leveraging all of that work and research that we did.
That's fantastic. Maryann?
Wait, it's a real privilege to share body language insights with people because it helps relationships of all kinds, whether they're business or their personal relationships. When you have a better sense of reading body language and using your body language to genuinely connect with another person, it just enhances the relationship so much. It moves things along faster. It smooths things. You get to pick up when people are nervous. When people learn these skills, I think it really helps everyone have a much richer and calmer and happier relationship.
I love it. Well, thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We've learned a ton. I hope that everybody reads Body Language Sales Secrets and I will also link to Roger Dooley's podcast because I think that the way you explained a sales meeting through that format was really fascinating as well. So thank you.
Our pleasure. It was a real treat talking with you.
It was.